Welcome to my presentation about the earliest prevention of insider threats. I will outline key societal challenges and how they will impact insider risk levels within any organization. I will also touch on areas of focus for organizations to address these challenges and for individuals and organizations, you and I, especially leadership, to stretch themselves to tackle such challenges as well. Addressing such broad challenges is not straightforward, but I will provide you with some key and practical pointers you can take away for your organization. I use some expert sources for this presentation, which I will list at the end. In insider risk management, much has written and discussed about the way in which we can recognize early on when someone is going off the critical pathway, reading red flags in computer systems, and how to respond to the situations in an appropriate manner. In social and behavioral sciences, there is a growing focus on preventing incidents. In this presentation, I will focus on even one step earlier, trying to prevent the threat in the first place. I believe this is much needed as the challenges seem overwhelming and society seems to be further apart and polarized than ever before. And this is really reflected in the workplace. I'm Elsien van Os, the CEO of Signpost 6, a global insider risk training and consultancy firm based in the Netherlands. I'm a clinical psychologist from an educational background, but I've always worked in intelligence and security. First in military intelligence and later as the head of threat assessment at Shell International, among other roles. I'm also the owner of Signpost Film Productions, which produced a documentary about Edward Snowden in 2018. Now, just to share a short personal story of experience, I founded Signpost 6 years ago, coincidentally. We have grown to a team of only 10 team members, but of these 10 people, we're from 7 different cultures, let alone our global network of associates that we have around us as well, based out of many different countries. Besides these cultures, we all have our different personalities, different stages in our careers, different needs, prefer ways of communicating, etc. And importantly, really, this is a very good thing. We need to complement each other, learn from each other, and have healthy disagreements. But really, here it comes. I have an opinion about geopolitical developments in the world, and especially right now about the war in the Ukraine. What does this mean for team members who might have a very different opinion? Our team, as a whole, have played a very active role supporting refugees from the wars since the war broke out end of February. In the Netherlands, we're not so far away from the Ukraine, and we felt like we needed to go to the border to support people there, but also take refugees to the Netherlands and to find them a good place and shelter to stay. So this took us a lot of time off our work, and some of the people who were in work and not off work were even further burdened with their workloads. All our views were aligned, but what if they weren't? We would have alienated team members. In fact, could I have even dealt with diverging views? Taking it even a step further, could I have hired a new team member with a different view on this particular matter? Would I have asked about it during recruitment? We just recruited new team members, and the answer is no. Who am I to find this important? Don't I just want a professional team member? These are highly sensitive matters. I'm talking about this on a personal level, but it's on people's minds, and organizations are struggling with these issues. And it goes to the heart of our organizations and managing risk. So, as this might sound like the start of a very broad conversation, I am going to bring it back to insider risk, so please do bear with me. But we first start with wider society and the troubles we have there to be able to understand what does this really mean for our organizations. There are many challenges in society affecting the workplace and insider risk. And today I want to talk about polarization, and in particular toxic polarization, and what this means for all of us in the workplace. I would like to answer the question I have for my own organization and for myself, and how I should relate to friends and colleagues about contentious themes. So when talking about polarization, what subjects come to your mind? What are you passionate about? And what are people around you passionate about? What subjects might have been raised with you among your family, friends, or coworkers? And what did you do? Here are just a few examples of key polarizing themes. So I said earlier, society seems to be further apart and polarized than ever before. Let's explore this. Polarization is the divergence of attitudes away from the center towards ideological extremes. Polarization is interesting and important because it's about reinforcing us-them thinking, which can easily escalate into violent confrontation. The workplace not excluded. Surveys show that Americans have become more fearful and hateful of supporters of the opposing political party, and imagine that they hold much more extreme views than that they actually do. Social psychologist Peter Coleman calls this toxic polarization, and it consists of two main components. Perceptual polarization, that is actually what I meant just now. It measures the degree to which we view the other side as extreme in comparison to our own. Thus, toxic polarization exists as a state of intense chronic polarization marked by high levels of loyalty to a person's in-group and contempt or even hate for out-groups. The other component of toxic polarization is affective polarization, which refers to when groups aren't simply in disagreement, but actively dislike or dehumanize each other. Here, political outgroup members are seen as a threat, and not only to ideas and values, but to identities and social groups. And toxic polarization leads to tribalism. It influences where we live, with who we work or socialize, and specifically in the workplace, it influences who we hire, who we promote, who we talk with and cooperate with, who we retain, and ultimately who gets disgruntled as a consequence of this. Coleman describes superstorms as reinforcing, complicated, vicious cyclones that strengthen division. Here you see a constellation of these cyclones or cycles that reinforce each other, making our patterns of division stronger and more difficult to change. Let's dive into one specific area, the role of social media. So today there is a development which plays a key role in polarization, and that is social media. The world has become very complicated with the high levels of information overload. We look at guiding lights, our influencers, to make sense of this world. And we live in an attention economy with 4 billion people on social media. Jay van Bavel and Dominic Becker have analyzed millions of messages on social media and found that moral emotional words like hatred or shame, are more likely to capture your attention and go viral. For each such word you use in a message, it's 15% more likely to get shared. It was getting shared by like-minded people only, no longer by people who might disagree with them. And so it was creating the appearance of an echo chamber where you were only getting engagement from people who agreed with you. And people who disagreed with you now saw you more as close-minded and less likely as a person who you would want to interact with. Van Bavel states this is a true double-edged sword. If you want to attract the attention in this world of information overload, you have to use moral emotional words, but you're only attracting like-minded people and pushing away people who disagree with you. And with that, also the debate. This has not only a polarizing effect, but moral emotional words moreover provoke contempt, anger, and disgust. And this differentiates disliking someone or something from hating, which is an emotion-containing risk. This process is also a breeding ground for misinformation, information that is presented as accurate, but later to be found false. Such false information can eventually lead to false beliefs or factual misperceptions, really posing problems on decision-making as well. And when people are polarized and tribalized, honest disagreement really becomes impossible. Anyone who disagrees is either stupid, malicious, something like that. In a democracy, politics involves compromise, give and take, and seeing the other side's point of view. In a polarized world, everything becomes a zero-sum game. He who is not with us is against us, and those on one side who are actually looking to compromise are in fact really working for the enemy and must be shamed into silence. Also Van Bavel actually mentions as well. So there are other workforce dynamics in all of this as well. Just wanted to mention very quickly what we're dealing with. Think of the following themes, really: the globalizing workforce, that doesn't need any explanation. The moving workforce. Last year I spoke about the Great Resignation and the risk of departing employees. Staff retention in general is a real issue. The diverse workforce, And not only diversity in the things that we think about, but also cognitive diversity, differences in how we work or process information in the best way. Or the distant workforce. The virtual workforce has been coming up for a long time and is here really to stay. So, questions for inside risk teams. Societal challenges demand continuous action and adaptation from organization, its leadership, and all its employees. It should also be reflected in the work of our inside risk management teams. If we're looking at the earliest prevention of insider threats, where do you see the breeding grounds in your organization? And how can we overcome these potential areas of tension by keep people connected in the workplace? As insider risk teams, ask yourself, what is your mandate? Do we look at insider risk holistically from prevent, detect, respond, and recover? And what does that prevention mean in your organization if you do prevention? Consider the challenges and now focus on polarization. What action should be taken and by whom or which departments? How do we address specific areas of tension, especially upon recruitment? Is my organization already thinking through and addressing these challenges? Or do we do things that make it worse? And finally, what can I do to role model the right behaviors? Insider risk teams need to set the right example, showcasing they understand this dynamic. But of course, in the end, this counts for everyone. So let's look at 3 key themes that can help organizations and yourself to maintain and improve connectedness in the workplace amidst really the polarizing superstorms, as we were just discussing. Here I want to talk about building a shared identity at work, cultural sensitivity, and personal role modeling. And these are just 3 out of many different things, but I think these are 3 key ones and important ones to look at. So building a shared identity. We have the tendency to identify with groups, and this can lead us in good and in bad directions. We need to leverage the potential opportunity to bring people together by building more inclusive identities in the workplace. Shared identities are really powerful for bridging divides, so finding common ground is often a first critical step in bringing people together. A high-stakes situation or a sense of common fate produces a shared identity, the knowledge that we together are part of a group. Adversity breeds pro-sociality. In turn, that shared identity produces solidarity and the ability to work together collectively. If this happens, shared identities become foundations on which people can coordinate and cooperate. It allows them to face and overcome a crisis that might have been difficult to address alone. I can really personally relate to this. At Shell, I've been working in conflict zones and in severe crisis situations. The bond and attachment to the team I have worked with is very, very strong. And I don't necessarily care how they feel about polarizing themes in life. This bond feels much stronger than that. It just overcomes this. Many organizations, including companies, schools, and even families, are set up to compete individually for rewards. But research shows that if people come together to work for common rewards, it provides a foundation for cooperation, coordination, and better collective problem solving and a shared identity. So 3 key lessons in terms of this shared identity. Build an environment of cooperation, not competition. Building a cooperative culture can help to reduce the false polarization bias. And this looks different in different workplace contexts. But a good start is to examine your bonus structures and replace competitive systems with collective rewards, one that promotes really cooperation between employees. Then encourage deeper connections between coworkers. Find opportunities to build trust, especially between coworkers that normally don't interact with each other. Seek each other out. And finally, culture of positive dissent. For our insider risk management teams, building a shared identity and safe environment helps people to understand that they can raise their voice if something is the matter with a coworker. I mean, oftentimes we're concerned as insider risk managers how employees are regarding an insider risk program, and maybe they have the feeling that they are big brother towards each other. Well, if you build that culture of positive dissent, you can do this in a more caring manner as well. So I think it sets the right framework, the right frame of mind. Then going to Cultural sensitivity. And remember, not only the subject of polarization, but also the other factors I mentioned, like the even further globalizing workforce. Cultural sensitivity and sensitivity in general across organizations is becoming really a must for all. Erin Meyer has developed a way to frame and understand the work behavior in various national cultures in her book, The Culture Map. She has formulated a framework of 8 different skills. Each of the 8 skills is described as a continuum between the 2 ends, which are diametrically opposite, or at least competing positions. I think the framework in general is really useful for us to reflect more on our assumptions when working together with different cultures. And I hope this exercise of reflection could actually then extend beyond culture as well. So this is the framework in a nutshell. I'll just highlight a couple of pointers around these 8 factors. Communicating, are they low context, so more simple and clear, or high context, rich, deep meaning in interactions? Evaluating, when giving negative feedback, does one give it directly or prefer being indirect and discreet? Leading, are people in groups egalitarian or do they prefer hierarchy? Deciding, are decisions made in consensus or made top-down? Trusting, do people base trust on how well they know each other or how well they work together? Disagreeing, are disagreements tackled directly or do people prefer to avoid confrontations? And scheduling, do they perceive time as absolute linear points or consider it a flexible range? And then finally, persuading, do they like to hear specific cases and examples or prefer holistic, detailed explanations? These aren't graded low to high. There's no good or bad. Actually, each endpoint has value from its own perspective. So let's take a look at an example. The trusting skill, which of course also in Insider Risk, it's a very important theme. So in China, Saudi Arabia, or Brazil, for example, trust stems from personal relationships built over time between people. And then if you're looking at the other end of the extreme, US, Denmark, and the Netherlands, trust really stems from working together or business activities. And in Insider Risk Management, we indeed talk about trust a lot. Can I trust my employee with my IP? But sometimes it's forgotten this is a two-way street and the meaning of it differs between people. So here, this has also been taken from Erin Meyer's culture map. So you can find this back in her book as well. And this is just an example of how you compare teams across national cultures. What is important is to understand the placement and then the gap between any 2 countries. This might be a nice pointer to have a look at also in your own global organizations. Some key lessons here. Cultural sensitivity can help building connections between people in the workplace and enhance a shared identity. And the framework provides guidance in understanding this. There are different ways in how to build trust and how to communicate, how to provide feedback, especially if it's negative, and how to change behavior and exert leadership. And in a globalized world, it is key to keep understanding each other. And that means we can remain effective and productive. And then the final factor or theme, role modeling. The leader of today, or even for all employees, we have to keep stretching ourselves, keep learning and adapting, particularly in the context of what we're discussing now, the subject of polarization. And I have 2 areas within here that I would like to discuss: self-reflecting and communicating in tense situations. So what if a situation or debate comes to a high? So just a snippet. Here you see the cranky uncle game. Be careful not to be manipulated by your in-group and social media yourself, and be mindful of your own use of language, your choice of words, not to alienate people from you. People around you are less willing to engage with you if they believe you hold emotion-based attitudes. They think you'll be close-minded and stop engaging with you. And a key solution to make you more resilient against fake news is inoculation. It means that you avoid being misled by learning in advance what fake news is made of. You learn how to recognize this early on. And the cranky uncle game is a form of pre-bunking intervention and uses cartoons and critical thinking to fight misinformation. Might be nice to have a look at this app. And a few snippets on communicating in tense situations. So what if it does go a bit wrong at work and in your conversations or in the subjects that you're disagreeing with a coworker? Well, time your dialogue right. Dialogue doesn't work unless the right timing. A polarization process goes through several stages. In the period up to escalation dialogue, in a sense of exchanging knowledge about each other's identity, that can be useful. So up to escalation dialogue can be useful, but in the heat of a conflict, dialogue is impossible, useless, and really counterproductive. In most conflict, there is a limit to the duration of this phase. So that's good news. Hereafter is a time for each pole for some self-reflection and expression, and only in the reconciliation phase, the timing is right for a real dialogue, where both ends of the pole are ready to start listening and curious to get to know each other. Check what's underneath the surface. Go into dialogue knowing your own intentions and wanting to understand the other's intentions and needs. The objective should not be changing someone's mind, as it might look manipulative and will push someone further away from you. It isn't about facts and persuasion, but it's about learning and discovery. And if you honestly do that, it will really make a difference. Perspective taking might help here. This is the cognitive capacity to consider the world from another individual's viewpoint. And it isn't empathy. Empathy is the ability to connect emotionally with another individual. And from negotiations literature, perspective taking has even proven to be much more effective. Then complicate. When you feel like you're completely opposed from your coworker on a certain subject, then try to seek out people who also hold these opposing views, and people that you respect for their intellect or well-informedness. Thinking with them can help you see things from a new perspective again as well. And when you feel there's no common ground whatsoever, and this might be with people believing in quite severe and widely acknowledged conspiracy theories, set some boundaries to your engagement about it, but always leave the door open for conversation, even if it isn't possible at that time. It's difficult, and we should acknowledge that a conversation just isn't possible at all times, but try to remain respectful and remember your choice of language. Bridging the gap. So this is what Insider Risk teams should be particularly good at. Of course, within the organization as a whole, Insider Risk teams should be able to speak the language of all functions and businesses and people. And there are a couple of specific actions as takeaways for Insider Risk teams in particular. Ahead of the threat, earliest prevention is essential and an opportunity for Insider Risk teams. You'd better focus on prevent and support of your employees instead of detect and respond and catching the bad guys. You need to do it all, but I think back about your mandate and how early prevention can help you furthering your insider risk management objectives. It will provide a foundation of support and the right framing to your program. And make sure a department or perhaps yourself is responsible for addressing polarization in the workplace, and review how it might affect your department or team as well. HR and business leadership are very important here. Then outside in, insider risk is also about the external threat environment and societal changes, and it requires constant adaptation. Integrate societal changes and challenges in your yearly insider risk assessment reviews. And I assume, of course, you do these assessments already. Then finally, not they, but you, pay particular attention to how you yourself address polarization in the workplace. It's not really about the insider that's doing something wrong, but where are you in the mix of this all? It's always easy to look at another person, but also look at yourself, and especially try to listen to the other side. So these were a few takeaways from me. I've used a couple of sources for this. On top, you see a couple of books listed that I found very helpful. In the bottom, you might be more familiar with these materials because they come from the insider risk domain. If you have questions, please find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or reach out to me on elsien@sampo6.com. I'm very curious what you thought about this particular subject, and I very much welcome the debate and the conversation. Thank you so much.